Hello and welcome back to another episode. Before I jump in to share my best tips for Instagram growth, I have two so exciting things, so very exciting, so extremely exciting things that I want to share with you. Number one, I am hosting, drumroll, my very first in-person training in October called the Profit Maven Summit, and ticket sales just launched, and I would love to see you there. It would be an absolute dream come true to be able to meet you in real life. I will leave a link in the show notes with more information, but when I say that it is going to be next level, I genuinely mean it. There has been so much thought, strategy, intention behind creating this summit. I even brought in a business partner who is an event planning expert who has planned events for people like Mark Zuckerberg and all sorts of other huge people, which you can see on the sales page if you go check it out. And I'm also bringing in the best speakers like Natasha Zork, Abigail Puth, Alyssa with Inspire Media Co. We actually just did an episode a few months ago with her, so you can go check out her episode, bringing in Haley Burkhead. So many good people, of course myself, to really bring you the best strategies to help you to increase your profits in your business. It's going to be 2 days of trainings and workshops and targeted networking. So I really hope to see you there. And again, that's linked down in the show notes. And my second exciting announcement is that Scalability is open for enrollment. This is the fourth round of Scalability. And this is the only time that I will be running Scalability live in 2024. Doors close April 14th. So if you are feeling drawn to it, please go check out the link that's also in the show notes if you want to learn more. But just a little summary. Scalability is a 6-week live program for service-based business owners who are looking to sustainably scale to 5K, 25K, and 50K months. So if you're looking for support in scaling your business, I really hope to see you inside. So that's it for my announcements. Okay, now let's chat Instagram growth. You may have heard or seen these tips before, especially if you follow me on Instagram. These are things that I've shared before. But my question to you is, are you actually implementing these things? Because it's one thing to have learned these things, to have seen these things, and it's a whole other thing to be taking action and implementing these things. And I want you to be doing the latter, right? We want to be implementing, we want to be taking action. And so don't tune out if you're like, I've heard these things before. Please stick with me till the end of the episode. I promise that it's going to be worth it. But also, after you've listened to these things, go out and actually implement them. Write it down in your calendar. Implement these things into your Instagram strategy, because that is how you're going to see results. Because again, it's one thing to know it and a whole other thing to be taking action and implementing. All right, number one, create a series. So I've been doing a lot of studying of Instagram accounts lately that have been growing by hundreds of thousands of followers over the last few months. And all of them have some sort of signature series that they post that brings in a lot of traffic. Now, some of them have a series that they repeat, meaning that maybe the series has 4 parts to it, and they'll run the series, so they'll post the 4 parts, and then a few months later they'll rerun that series again, whether it be the exact copy and paste again, or what they'll do is tweak it, change it a little bit. Or I've also seen some people have series that's just like a long string of content that is woven into their other content. An example of this would be like my series. So I had a series in the past, and it's been over a year now, I think, since I've even posted into this series. So if you're new around here, you might not have seen it, but I had a series that was called Instagram Hacks I Bet You Didn't Know, and I had 30 parts to this series. So it was a very long series, but I didn't sit down for an entire month and just post part 1, part 2 back to back for 30 days. It was content that was interwoven into my other content. So I might post Instagram Hacks I Bet You Didn't Know part 1, and then I might post a few other posts, and then a few weeks later I might post part 2, and so on and so forth. And I've seen series done both ways, where it's like they post it in a chunk where every day for X amount of days, however many parts they have, they just post it back to back in a row. But I've also seen series that are just like interwoven. There's not really a right or wrong answer there. It just depends on how long that series is. I would say if the series is going to be shorter, like 4 parts or 5, I'd say 4 or 5 parts or less, then I would probably post them back to back. And if it's going to be a little bit longer, then I would say probably weave it into your different content there. But the reason why I've seen this work so well is because when someone sees, let's just say, part 5 of your series, and they're like, I love this, what are they going to be thinking? Okay, this is part 5, which means that there's a part 4, a part 3, a part 2, a part 1, and they're going to want to go back and check out that content. So they're going back into your feed, they're checking out that content, which boosts those views. And if you have a series that's like interwoven into your other content, as they're checking out the other parts in your series, they're also going to be coming across your other content, which is going to help to boost those views. And a series 2, when they know that series is going to continue in the future, they're going to want to follow along so that they're going to get access to those future parts of the series, right? You could even say in that series, here's part 5, follow along for part 6, which will be posted, let's just say in a week from now, where we're going to dive into XYZ topic or something along those lines. You create an incentive to keep people coming back, basically. And what I noticed out of the ones that I was studying is most of the series were done through Reels, but I have seen one series that was done through a carousel. And the reason why that carousel worked so well as a series was because it was super shareable. So there were a bunch of people who were sharing it on their stories, and it made that post go viral. And then because people liked that, they came back to this person's Instagram account. They wanted more content like that. And so when she created a series out of it, all the future carousel posts and the ones in the past have all performed really well. I guess you can't have future posts perform well, but I know that they will perform well because of how her posts in the past have performed. Now, something else I want to address here, because I do get asked this frequently, especially with my clients, when I'm telling them, hey, let's create a series, and we craft up this series, and the series isn't performing as well as they're wanting it to. And they're like, okay, you just told me to create a series because it works well for Instagram growth and I'm not growing. What I will say to this is 2 different things. Number 1, give it time. So when I started my series, the Instagram growth hacks, and I would say it probably took me until like part 6 of that series for me to be able to recognize that like people were coming back to the other parts, and that my series was like starting to pick up in terms of like popularity, if that makes sense. So it took me 6 times of posting posts in this series for things to pick up. So if you have a longer series, don't give up on it. Continue posting it. There's still power and benefit to posting that, even if the posts in that series are not performing exponentially better than your other posts necessarily. Now, if I would say if the posts are performing worse than your normal post, like it's performing below the average, then I would say maybe that's something that we need to shift there. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I would say is it might not be a series that people are super interested in, and that's totally fine. You're going to have to experiment a little bit, and the first series and maybe even the second series or maybe even the third series that you create, it might not perform super well, but once you do find a series that works, you're going to be able to replicate that, right? And that applies to anything when it comes to Instagram, not just creating a series. It's going to take you time to figure out what works well. And I actually just thought of a third thing that I would suggest doing when it comes to your series is looking at your hook of your series is one of the most important things when it comes to creating a series that's going to go viral or at least perform above average in terms of your reach when it comes to your content. And a hook is always important. And that's actually one of my tips that I'm going to get to in just a minute, is talking about hooks. But specifically for creating a series, you need to have a really catchy hook that is short, sweet, to the point, that helps people understand what it is that they're going to get by watching this series, but also at the same time is like really eye-catching too. So that's something where it might not be the content inside of your series itself that people are not interested in. It could just simply be the hook that's not engaging enough to get them to want to go check out that series. So that's something else to think about there. Now, number 2 in terms of tips is collaborate. Again, you've heard this tip probably 1,000 times. If you follow me on Instagram, if you're in IG University, I talk about this all the time. If you're one of my clients, I talk about this all the time. Why do I keep talking about it? Because when I go to someone's Instagram account who's, hey, how do I get more non-follower reach? How do I reach more people? One of the easiest ways to do this that is pretty much guaranteed to get you more non-follower reach and bring more people into your Instagram account, as long as your Instagram account has been optimized, is collaboration. It is such a good strategy. Okay, but this doesn't just mean, though, Instagram Reels and lives and carousels. Like, yes, you can collaborate through all those different means, but you can also collaborate through email. So if you go listen to the episode that's titled "How to 10x your Instagram or your how to 10x your email list growth this year," I talk about how to utilize emails and doing collaborations to boost your subscribers through your email list. But what you could also do is going into those collaborations with the intention of driving traffic to your Instagram account, so you could utilize that email collaboration to also bring in followers. Another thing that you could do is you can collaborate by being a podcast guest. So there are so many different ways that you can collaborate that will really help you to grow your Instagram account. But I will say, if you're looking for the best return on investment in terms of like converting the most amount of followers, I'm going to say that Instagram Reels as well as Instagram carousel posts are probably the best. In my experience, those are the best ways to collaborate if you're looking for the biggest return in terms of getting followers. I would say that collaboration through email and collaboration through podcasting, you're probably going to get more high quality followers, meaning that the people who are coming in through that are going to be people who are pretty like hot leads into your business. So there's not necessarily like a downside to doing those collaborations. It's just a different pro than doing an Instagram Reel collaboration. The pro to an Instagram Reel collaboration is you're probably going to get more followers, whereas the pro to collaborating like by being a podcast guest is you're probably going to get more followers that would be probably more hot leads. And again, that's just generally speaking. It's not to say that from an Instagram Reel you can't get a hot lead. Okay, number 3 in terms of tips is focusing on increasing length of reel and watch time. So I did a series of experiments over several months in 2023 where I would test shorter reels versus longer reels that include the same exact content, but to see whether or not shorter reels perform better or longer reels perform better. And while this is not a fact in terms of the algorithm, this is my theory and I've tested it heavily, and so I'm pretty like confident in this theory, and I've also had other people test this on their Instagram accounts too and seen the same results. But my theory is that a longer reel with a high watch time will outperform a shorter reel with a high watch time. And so is that to say that you should never post short reels ever again? No, that's not at all what I'm saying. But what I am saying is every once in a while, try creating a longer reel. And if that longer reel has a high watch time, usually high meaning like 75, 80% above, in terms of like people who are completing that. So if you go into your insights on Instagram, you're going to be able to see watch time and it'll show you the average watch time. So let's just say that your reel is 15 seconds long, but your average watch time is like only 5 seconds long, then your percentage in terms of watch time is going to be not short. It's going to be small. It's not going to be like 75 or 80%. So you do want to aim for that 75, 80% range. But what you'll see if you're not familiar with creating longer reels, if you're someone like me who had only really created short reels, prior to my experiment, I had only ever created short reels. So if you're like me and then you start diving into these longer reels and then they're suddenly like not performing well, it's not necessarily because the longer reel itself isn't performing well. It's the technique behind creating a longer reel that keeps people engaged. It's a whole different strategy than a shorter reel. Like with short reels, what's really popular is they'll have a hook and then it'll give you maybe one tip and it'll say read the caption, right? That's a very easy duplicatable strategy. And I'm again not saying that's bad, but when it comes to a longer reel, to keep someone's attention for longer than 5 to 7 seconds, you really have to be good at capturing attention. And so you have to get a little bit more strategic with the creation of that reel. And so it is going to push you out of your comfort zone a little bit more, especially if you are only used to creating shorter reels. But that is something that I would really encourage you to do, is every once in a while throw in a longer reel and see how that performs. And over time, you're going to realize, okay, let's just say that I posted this longer reel. the average watch time was only 5 seconds, but this reel was 15 or 20 seconds. How can I shift my strategy to get people to watch longer? So the next time you create a longer reel, you're going to change things. You're going to be able to change maybe the length that the text is on the screen or how you're presenting the information to see if you're able to keep people on there for longer. That's something that is so good for Instagram growth, is really focusing on creating these longer reels that have a high watch time, but that's going to happen through experimenting. So again, you're probably listening to this and you're like, Maya's saying experiment a lot. Yeah, that's just how Instagram is. There's no one size that fits all. I wish I had the perfect exact strategy when it comes to longer reels that I could give you. But that being said, it totally depends on your audience. It totally depends on your niche. It totally depends on the information that you're presenting as to what's going to work and what's not going to work. So that actually leads me really well though into tip number 4, which is storytelling versus sharing tips. So I've had a lot of people come to me recently and they keep saying, I see all this content on Instagram that says stop posting educational content on Instagram. And they're like, what are your thoughts on that? I personally believe that you should still 100% post educational content on Instagram, but you need to approach educational content differently. And how this applies to tip number 3 is a lot of the times when we're creating educational content in like 2021, 2022 was, here are 5 tips for creating a viral reel. I'm just giving an example in terms of like my niche. And it would just list those 5 tips. And did that perform well back then? Yeah, 110%. But when it comes to educational content now, people are so used to seeing that type of content that it's no longer, I would say it's no longer helpful in terms of a consumer standpoint. So like people who are consuming that content, I don't think it's quite as valuable for them, but also in terms of reach. So helping us to bring in more followers, I don't think that type of content is the most beneficial anymore. But that doesn't mean that the tips themselves are not helpful. It's how the information is presented. And so if you approach this information from a more storytelling standpoint versus just tips, then that's going to help attract more people because it's being presented in a unique way, right? There's so many different stories that we can tell that we can intertwine these tips into, versus if you're just sharing tips, like there's only so many tips that you can share, right? But if we're telling a story where we've learned in our personal life or through our clients, or even if it's just like simply a metaphor or analogy, that's going to be, there's so many different ways that we can present this information outside of just like a list of these 5 tips here. So again, going back to increasing the length of your reel, a really great way to increase the length of your reel is by adding in more of the storytelling approach, because I would say most short reels are just going to say 5 tips for XYZ. Here are the 5 tips, and that's why the reel is so short. But if we could shift that, let me just go back to the example of 5 tips for creating viral reels. I might take a more storytelling approach and create a longer reel with it. And I might approach it from the aspect of, here's what I learned when my post hit 1 million views or something along those lines. And I'm going to take people through the 5 things that I learned on my journey. So it's a little bit more storytelling versus here are 5 things. You know what I'm saying? Hopefully you know what I'm saying. Okay. Number 5 is focus on your hooks. So this is another thing that, in terms of what worked in the past versus what's working right now, it's shifting and changing. And so the hooks, like the 5 tips for blank or how to do blank, you can still use them 100%. And I'm not saying that won't work for you. I will say generally those are not performing as well just because they're super overused. So they're saturated and repetitive. And so how can we shift the way that we approach hooks to make our hooks stand out more, which is going to help increase our reach, which is going to help increase our conversion of viewers to followers, right? Because the more people that we reach, the more potential that we have to bring those people in as followers. And so there are a few different ways that I want you to approach hooks. And I'm going to run you through these different ways. But if you want a written out version of this so you can read through this and maybe that makes a little bit more sense for you, I'm going to link a hook guide down in the show notes where it walks you through all this. So the first way that we can approach hooks is through a pain point reframe. Now, this type of reframe is looking at what the outcome or result is that your consumer or your potential follower, whatever you want to call them, what they want, and presenting that as the hook. So really thinking about what people will be able to achieve if they implement what your content teaches them versus just telling them what you're going to teach them. So you want to ask yourself in this situation here, what do people really want in terms of results? And then you're going to add that into your hook. So instead of having a hook that says how to optimize your account for SEO, which that how-to type of hook, again, is that it's so repetitive. I'm not saying you can't ever utilize it, but it's very repetitive. What we can do to add in more of a engaging, unique hook to this piece of content is reframing it and saying something more along the lines of increase your reach or increase your account reach in 2 easy steps. So again, instead of how to optimize your account for SEO, try using increase your account reach in 2 easy steps. So that's one reframe. Another way that we can reframe our hooks is through storytelling. So this type of reframe is really taking your educational content, like a tip or a hack, and adding a story to it. So it's not going to make sense, I would say, for every piece of content to approach your hook in this way. But if you can think of a story behind whatever it is that you're teaching, this is a really great one to implement. So let's just say that you're teaching about the importance of drinking water. Ask yourself, do I have a story myself that I could pair this education with? Or maybe you have a client story or something along those lines. Or maybe you've heard a story or an analogy or something along those lines. Maybe, let's just say you've been dehydrated before while you were on a hike, and you can use that to use that story to really showcase the importance of drinking water and share your tips in a unique and engaging way. So what this reframe would look like is, instead of sharing a hook that says 5 tips to hit 100K months, try using a hook that's more along the lines of like, people don't really understand what it takes to hit 100K months. So that's a totally different approach to hooks. But you'll see that 5 tips to hit 100K months, again, it's not to say that's not going to necessarily perform well, but I would say generally those types of hooks are not going to perform as well as people don't understand what it really takes to hit 100K months, because that's unique, it's fresh, it's new, and it's not overused. So people are going to be more intrigued by it. Our next type of reframe is our question reframe. Now, this type of reframe is thinking about the questions that people ask you. So if you're going to share tips on watering your garden, what questions might people ask you that you can then share those exact tips with them? So what I mean by that is, maybe they'd ask, how often should I water XYZ plant? And then you could use that as your hook for your content. So what you can do here is you can look at your direct messages and your comments, or even Q&A boxes for different questions that people are asking. And then you can use that exact question phrased in the exact way that they put it as your hooks. And when you're using the exact language that your consumers would use, they're going to feel a lot more connected to you. So an example of this would be, instead of having the hook of how to grow 1,000 followers, you could try using a hook of what would an extra 1,000 followers do for your business? Something along those lines. Or how can I convert my followers to, or how could I convert my reach to followers to grow to 1,000 followers, or something along those lines. So framing it as a question. We have 2 more reframes here, so stick with me when it comes to these hooks here. The next one is your expertise reframe. Now, this type of reframe when it comes to hooks is presenting the hook from the perspective of what you have achieved or what your clients have achieved. So instead of talking about tips or tricks or hacks, you're sharing the experiences that you or your clients had to learn about through a certain lesson and why that's important. So instead of a hook of 5 tips to hit 10K, you could try using what I learned from growing to 10K followers. And lastly is your personal experience reframe. Now, this type of reframe is different than storytelling, and it's also different than expertise too, because it ties into your personal life. So this is something that's not at all related to your business, but you're relating it back to your business. So you're taking, again, something that's not related to your business, but relating it back to your business. So thinking about an event that has happened in your personal life that you have learned an important lesson from, and how those same concepts that you learned in that lesson can apply to something that you teach people in your business. So the event is what personalizes the education and really helps people to feel connected to you. And so what you could say, instead of a hook of 25 small business tips for growth, you could try using what pregnancy taught me about business, right? So we're taking something that's totally not related to business, pregnancy, right? Unless I guess you're in the birthing space, then that obviously would be something that is related. But in terms of my business, pregnancy is not related, right? So I'm taking pregnancy and I'm relating it to business. And so the concepts that I'm learning through pregnancy, I'm going to teach people about how that can apply to their business. So those are just some different ways that you can approach hooks. And again, please do not take this wrong. I'm not saying that you can't ever use a hook of how to do XYZ or 5 tips for XYZ. I'm not saying you can't ever use those, but I'm saying that if your content is not resonating, oftentimes it's the hook. And so take a look at your hooks and see if you can shift these hooks and implement every once in a while these different reframes when it comes to these hooks, and see how that helps your content perform. Now, the 6th tip and last tip is repurpose your top performing content. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but sometimes I just forget that I can repurpose my content. Like last week, no joke, I was sitting down looking at my content calendar and I was like, wait, why haven't I repurposed these pieces of content that went viral last year? Like I haven't even mentioned the topic again on my Instagram account since it went viral last year. And I'm like, that's such a great opportunity for me to create more views, because I assume that when I repurpose this piece of content that performed well in the past, people like that topic, right? That's not always the case, but I would say generally that's the case. If you have had content that performs above average, usually when you repost it again or repurpose it, which I'm going to get to reposting versus repurposing in just a second, and the difference between the two. But usually when you're repurposing that, it's going to perform well again. And also too, here's the thing, which again, I don't know why I forget this. So as an Instagram expert, I'm always forgetting this. So I need to remind you too, because odds are probably pretty high you're along with me and you're probably forgetting it too. Not everyone sees our content. Not everyone sees our content. And so when we are repurposing this content, it's actually really beneficial for our audience, because they might not have seen it when we posted it 1 or 2 times in the past. So don't be afraid to repurpose that content. Now, quick conversation, reposting versus repurposing. Reposting is not the same thing as repurposing. Reposting is taking the exact content and just posting it again. Repurposing is taking the concepts inside of that piece of content and making it new. So adding something new or bringing it into a new content format. So let's just say it was a reel, you're bringing it and creating a carousel, or maybe you're creating a carousel into a reel. That's repurposing. We're moving things around. We're changing and shifting things just slightly. And the reason why you want to do that versus just reposting is because of what is called the original content ranking in the algorithm. Now, this was introduced, I think it was end of 2022. So it's been a while that this was introduced. But Adam Mosseri talked about this, and there is I don't know, it's called a ranking, but I don't know the best way to present this, but it's a ranking in the algorithm where the algorithm can detect reposted content. And basically what Adam said is reposted content is going to perform less well in terms of like reach and views than the original piece of content. So if you're reposting things, just keep that in mind. That could potentially not perform as well. Now, I don't know all the details, and it hasn't been ever since Adam Mosseri talked about it at the end of 2022. I don't think it's been talked about really ever since in terms of like more details here. So I don't know exactly what all the intricacies of the original content ranking in the algorithm, what it is versus what it isn't, but I'm just giving you my perspective when it comes to that ranking. I would say, just if you're wanting to get the optimal amount of reach, don't repost it, just repurpose it. And repurpose could even just simply be like changing the background video of the reel and just keeping the exact content the same. Again, though, I don't know all the intricacies. I don't know if the algorithm can detect if the text is exactly the same, if that counts as reposting, even if the video is different. But I would just say from my perspective, like changing the hook of it, or changing the video in the background, or, changing up the caption, I would say that probably would constitute as not a repost, because it's not the exact same thing. So all that being said, those are the 6 tips. And I just want to say, if you focus on nothing else this year when it comes to Instagram growth, let it please be these 6 things, because these truly are the best things that I have found when it comes to Instagram growth, not just from my own experience, not just from my clients' experience, but from me studying hundreds of Instagram accounts, doing audits on hundreds of Instagram accounts, and really always just keeping up to date on what is the best things that are working on Instagram. So I hope that this episode was helpful. And again, remember that we're not just here to learn the things, we're here to implement the things. So go out and do things today.